bonus track. I don't know a better way to describe it. If we haven't met yet, my name is Steve. I am one of the pastors here at 2. I have something I wanted to share about this morning. Robbie, when he started his message, he started talking about seasons. And fall is probably my favorite out of the 4. I don't know, I just love it. I got a lot of outdoor hobbies. I'm an enthusiast, as it were. So I look forward to this time. But it was the fall back in 2002. I was a student at Radford University. That's where I went to school for my undergrad. And this was the first time, we're also talking about call. This was the first time where I felt a very specific calling from God. It was, we talked about the burning bush and how there's this like audible voice and this really crazy moment. It wasn't like this actual audible voice, but I would say it was, for me, it was the time where it was like the closest thing to that. And I felt God. I was sitting outside of a residence hall on campus with some friends. I was looking around. There's people walking around, and it was, what I heard felt was God saying, "I want to do something on this campus, and I want you to be a part of that." And at the time, NLCF had a congregation there, and that's where I got plugged in with the church. We don't have a congregation there anymore. I don't foresee that happening. I mean, it could, who knows? But it's not, it's not a thing anymore. But that was the moment where I knew that I was going to go on staff with this church. That was the moment I knew that God was calling me into full-time ministry, and that was scary because I didn't know what that was going to look like. After I graduated, that's what I did. I went on staff with NLCF. At the time, the kind of missions organization was called Great Commission Ministries. It's now called Reliant. And I did that in January of 2004. Fast forward a little bit to last fall. It was sometime in September. I don't remember where it was. I don't remember if the leaves were falling or anything like that. But I had another moment where something kind of popped up, and I had this internal dialogue that quickly turned itself into like a lot of prayer with God. And, I brought it up with Amy, what I had been thinking, what I had been praying through, and it was a little nerve-wracking to do this. But what I had been thinking through and praying about was oriented around this question. And it is this: what would our life look like if I was not on staff with this church anymore? Where I wasn't a pastor here anymore. And it was really, I was scared to bring this up with Amy because we've been in this since we've been married. And just as much as I'm nervous to bring it up here today, I've been a staff member at this church for 21 years, almost 22 come January. I've been a pastor here for 8 years. I've been a member of this church since 1999, so the late 1900s. My freshman year, that was when I came in, it was in 99. And so this question is significant, especially actually taking the time to entertain the question. For anybody here who works, I'm sure at some point in your job you've said, what if I wasn't doing this anymore? And sometimes that can be fueled by like, forget this place, I want to do something else, anything else. But sometimes you think, I wonder what could be, right? You ask these questions from a sense of curiosity. But it caused me to do a lot of reflection, asking myself a lot of questions, and some of them were like this, like, where is this coming from? Has anything specific led to this? Is there like this one moment where it was like, yeah, this is it? Questions like, what would I do if I didn't do this? And how do I know if this is really serious enough to consider? Because some of y'all have been around NLCF. There's been some tough moments, right? Where I've been like, yeah, I could easily see myself doing anything else, And any job can be like that. Riley's really sad right now about this. She's like, I can't handle Steve. But there's some things that I found out in the midst of all this reflection and all this question asking. There's 4 that I listed out. I'm sure there's more than that. But one is that vocational ministry, so like being paid to do ministry, it's a very specific calling. I had that very specific calling, and I felt it, and it has been real, and it is real today. It isn't something that you just do because you didn't know what else to do. I mean, sometimes people do that, and you're like, this is not the right reason, right? It's got to be a specific thing. The idea of leaving vocational ministry, it's not something that I should take lightly. It's not a decision also that should happen in a vacuum where it's like, yeah, just me. And like, yeah, maybe I'll talk to Amy about it, but I'm just going to make this decision. That's not how we roll in our house, and it's also not how we roll in this church. Another thing was that being staff with the church, because before I was a pastor, I was a staff member of this church, it has really been a true joy. It's difficult at times, for sure, like anything. And for pastors specifically, there is a weight that actually feels like weight that we carry. You may not know this because you're not pastors here. Anybody who has been a pastor knows what that weight's like. It feels like a weight. And then another thing is that at no point have I ever questioned, or we have ever questioned, is NLCF the right place for us? It is. This is our home. It continues to be home for us. But there's one thing that kind of pushed its way to the forefront in my reflection, and it is that I am not as resilient in this job as I think the church deserves. I'm not as resilient as I think I ought to be. I don't recover well. Even from things that really are kind of minor at times, I'm like, gosh, what donuts do we pick? I don't know. Like, that's not it at all. But like, that's an example. It's like just little things. I just don't have the capacity to run with things as well as I ought to. And so after a lot of prayer and consideration, prayer with God, conversations with Amy, with the other pastors, the deacons, a handful of people here in this room, I've decided that I'm going to transition out of my role as a pastor in this church and as a staff member. Because sometimes, Wendy is a good example of this. Wendy was a pastor in this church. She transitioned out of that role, but she continues to be staff. So you see her teaching and running around and doing all sorts of stuff. I'm going to be more like Jim Pace, who's not here today, ironically. I will be here, but Jim, he stepped out of the role. He stepped out as a pastor, but he also stepped out of the role as a staff member. And so I will join him in the back row as to what he jokingly calls a faceless tithing congregant. That's what he says in the back. And so this feels really weird in this moment. And there's some things that I think are really important to say. One, nothing specific has happened. There's no story behind the scenes, because some of y'all be like, what really happened? There's nothing like that. There's no thing that isn't being communicated. No one has asked me to step down. Part of the reason that I'm doing it is because I don't want it to get to that point where somebody puts their hand on my shoulder and says, Steve, it's time. I'd rather leave well. I am not unhappy with how things are going here in NLCF, and I mean this from my heart. In fact, and this is specific to generations, which is my primary role of pastoral leadership here, that I can't think of a time when we have been more healthy as a congregation. There's a lot of ways you can look at the health of a church. Some people just look at how big it is. I think that's a terrible way to judge health only. Things are just really well here, and I'm excited to see how God is moving and how he will continue to move here. I just don't think I have the capacity to be the person to help lead it into that space. I have the capacity to serve, and I'll continue to do that. I'll get to that in a moment. But I just don't have the capacity to lead it. And in some strange way, I think that kind of like one of my finishing well, shepherding well, is actually leaving it in the hands of the people who will continue to lead and shepherd well. Amy, Evie, Porter, and myself, we aren't going anywhere. This is probably the last thing I think is really important. We love it here. Again, 1999, it's a long time. We don't foresee ourselves going anywhere. I'll be joining Jim in the back row where I sit normally anyway, because that's just my style. But we love it here. This is our home, and we want it to continue to be our home. And NLCF is weird in this way, where you can be a pastor of a church, step out of that role, and it's okay to still be there. I know I've heard so many stories of pastors who they step out of the role of the church and they just go somewhere else. And we don't want to do that, we don't feel like any Porter shaking his head back there. We have no desire to do that, and it's not our plan at all. So just know that. And finally, this shift is not happening today. This isn't like my last moment here. We still have a month to go. In all of my years in following Jesus, I have been a firm believer that each and every one of us in this room, and as followers of Jesus, we are called to serve in the church. We are called to be a blessing to our neighbors, to love one another, to love others, to love God, and to use the gifts that He has given us for the sake of His kingdom. It doesn't matter if you're a pastor or this is your first Sunday. You're called to be a part of God's good work, right? Our aim is to certainly do that, to continue to do that. There will be a season where we will not do that, though, for just a little bit. I don't know how long. We're not putting a date on it on purpose. But come October, we'll step out of all the roles that we have just for a little bit to kind of figure out what does it look like to follow Jesus and not get paid to do that, right? I have to. It's been a long time. I have to relearn a lot of things in my own faith, experience God in ways that I haven't before, or it's been some time. And so we want to just have space to be able to do that. We'll be here on Sundays when we're in town, but we will feel the freedom to travel and visit family because our weekends will be a little different, right? Yeah. And so some things that are next. For me, as many of you might know, a few years ago, I got my contractor's license, and I started doing that part-time. And that, at the time, it was not some long-term exit strategy. I am not that smart. I am not that forward-thinking. That is just not who I am. But I did it because I have a knack for it. I wanted to do something with my hands in addition to what I was doing in ministry. But come October, I will be going full-time as a contractor. Please pray for us. I am appropriately nervous for that. And so is Amy. It's a new thing, and new things can be scary, right? But that doesn't mean that we avoid them. For NLCF, to be honest, Sundays aren't going to look terribly different around here. You won't see me teaching, but that's okay. We have one of the things that also makes us unique is that it is not the same person who teaches every Sunday. It's not even just pastors that teach on Sunday. We have a teaching team, a multitude of voices who are communicating God's word to the community, and it is a beautiful thing. And we are blessed to have that in our church. And so you will continue to hear from some really great voices. Jeanette and Robbie and Crystal, they will continue to be present here in Generations and be leading and serving and shepherding this congregation. Wendy will still continue in her roles. It'll be a really good time to see what God does in our midst. Also, for the time being, Curtis and Elena have kind of said Generations is going to be our home-based congregation for a while, as long as they're here, and we are blessed to have them be serving in this space. And Riley, too. We love Riley. We love her. And so we're just excited. New seasons can be good. There can be a learning curve, but we are not required to freak out when new seasons come around, when something new is put before us. A phrase that kind of just, I don't know where it came from. I think it could have come out of frustration with a lot of questions about worry from our kids, but not about this, but just in general, because kids will have a lot of questions. But a phrase that has kind of come up in our family is wait and see and pray in the meantime. Waiting doesn't mean we just sit on our hands and do nothing. We can have active waiting, right? But that's our aim of what we try and do in our family when worry creeps in. And so with that being said, I'd like to take a moment and pray, because it's a new season coming around the corner. It's not here yet, but it's coming around the corner. And we want to be active in the way that we interact with God, in the way that we pursue Him, in the way that we seek to know what's next. And so I want to invite you to stand with me. Band, y'all can come on back up. We're going to pray and then do another song. And then I'm going to come back up here because I got a microphone. We're going to send us out for the day. Oh, and if you have any questions, you can ask me now. Some of y'all have known for a little while. You can now talk about it. And just if you have questions or things, you're like, Steve, I don't know. You're welcome to say that. Come up and tell me. But just, we're here. So don't hesitate to ask. But let's take a moment and pray. Jesus, we thank you for seasons. We thank you that beautiful things come and they go, and then they look different in beautiful new ways. And as your church, we want to be a people who are serving you and loving each other and getting to know you, getting to know each other and our neighbors well. I'm thankful for this group of people. I'm thankful that we get to live life together and worship you together and to know you together. Would you continue to show us what it means to live and work and thrive in community together? And may we have the boldness to step into new seasons that you invite us into. We love you. Amen.